I hardly heard him. I was reading the paper. That whole page was covered with stories about us. The fight, the murder, the church burning, the Socs being drunk, everything. My picture was there with dairy and soda pop. The article told how Johnny and I had risked our lives saving those little kids. And there was a comment from one of the parents who said that they would have all burned to death if it hadn't been for us. It told the whole story of our fight with the Socs, only they didn't say Socs because most grown-ups don't know about the battles that go on between us. They had interviewed Cherry Valance, and she said Bob had been drunk and that the boys had been looking for a fight when they took her home. Bob had told her he'd fix us for picking up his girl. His buddy Randy Adderson, who had helped jump us, also said it was their fault and that we'd only fought back in self-defense. But they were charging Johnny with manslaughter. Then I discovered that I was supposed to appear at juvenile court for running away, and Johnny was too if he recovered. Not if, I thought again. Why do they keep saying if? For once, there weren't any charges against Dally, and I knew he'd be mad because the paper made him out a hero for saving Johnny and didn't say much about his police record, which he was kind of proud of. He'd kill those reporters if he got hold of them. There was another column about just Derry and Soda and me, how Derry worked on 2 jobs at once and made good at both of them, and about his outstanding record at school. It mentioned Soda Pop dropping out of school so we could stay together, and then I made the honor roll at school all the time and might be a future track star. Oh yeah, I forgot. I'm on the A squad track team, the youngest one. I'm a good runner. Then it said we shouldn't be separated after we had worked so hard to stay together. The meaning of that last line finally hit me. You mean, I swallowed hard, that they're thinking about putting me and Soda in a boys' home or something? Steve was carefully combing back his hair in complicated swirls. Something like that? I sat down in a daze. We couldn't get hauled off now, not after me and Derry had finally got through to each other, and now that the big rumble was coming up, and we'd settled this Soc greaser thing once and for all. Not now, when Johnny needed us, and Dally was still in the hospital and wouldn't be out for the rumble. No, I said out loud. And Two-Bit, who was scraping the egg off the clock, turned to stare at me. No what? No, they ain't gonna put us in a boys' home. Don't worry about it, Steve said, cocksure that he and Soda Pop could handle anything that came up. They don't do things like that to heroes. We're Soda and Superman. That was as far as he got, because Derry, shaved and dressed, came in behind Steve and lifted him up off the floor, then dropped him. We all called Derry Superman or Muscles at one time or another, but one time Steve made the mistake of referring to him as all brawn and no brain, and Derry almost shattered Steve's jaw. Steve didn't call him that again, but Derry never forgave him. Derry has never really gotten over not going to college. That was the only time I've ever seen Soda mad at Steve, although Soda attaches no importance to education. School bored him. No action. Soda came running in. Where's that blue shirt I washed yesterday? He took a swig of chocolate milk out of the container. Hate to tell you, buddy, Steve said, still flat on the floor, but you have to wear clothes to work. There's a law or something. Oh yeah, Soda said. Where are those wheat jeans, too? I ironed. They're in my closet, Derry said. Hurry up, you're going to be late. Soda ran back, muttering, I'm hurrying. Steve followed him, and in a second there was the general racket of a pillow fight. I absent-mindedly watched Derry as he searched the icebox for chocolate cake. Derry, I said suddenly, did you know about the juvenile court? Without turning to look at me, he said evenly, yeah, the cops told me last night. I knew then that he realized we might get separated. I didn't want to worry him anymore, but I said, I had one of those dreams last night, the one I can't ever remember. Derry spun around to face me, genuine fear on his face. What? I had a nightmare the night of Mom and Dad's funeral. I'd had nightmares and wild dreams every once in a while when I was little, but nothing like this one. I woke up screaming bloody murder, and I never could remember what it was that had scared me. It It scared Soda Pop and Derry almost as bad as it scared me, for night after night, for weeks on end, I would dream this dream and wake up in a cold sweat or screaming, and I never could remember exactly what happened in it. Soda began sleeping with me, and it stopped recurring so often, but it had happened enough for Derry to take me to a doctor. The doctor said I had too much imagination. He had a simple cure, too. Study harder, read more, draw more, and play football more. After a hard game of football and 4 or 5 hours of reading, I was too exhausted mentally and physically to dream anything. But Derry never got over it, and every once in a while he would ask me if I ever dreamed any more. Was it very bad? Two-Bit questioned. He knew the whole story, and having never dreamed about anything but blondes, he was interested. No, I lied. I had awakened in a cold sweat and shivering, but Soda was dead to the world. I had just wiggled closer to him and stayed awake for a couple of hours, trembling under his arm. That dream always scared the heck out of me. Derry started to say something, but before he could begin, Soda Pop and Steve came in. You know what? Soda Pop said to no one in particular. When we stomp the Socs good, me and Stevie here are gonna throw a big party and everybody can get stoned. Then we'll go chase the Socs clear to Mexico. Where are you gonna get the dough, little man? Derry had found the cake and was handing out pieces. I'll think of something, Soda Pop assured him between bites. You gonna take Sandy to the party? I asked, just to be saying something. Instant silence. I looked around. What's the deal? Soda Pop was staring at his feet, but his ears were reddening. No, she went to live with her grandmother in Florida. How come? Look, Steve said, surprisingly angry. Does he have to draw you a picture? It was either that or get married, and her parents almost hit the roof at the idea of her marrying a 16-year-old kid. 17, Soda said softly. I'll be 17 in a couple of weeks. Oh, I said, embarrassed. Soda was no innocent. I had been in on bowl sessions, and his bragging was as loud as anyone's. But never about Sandy. Not ever about Sandy. I remembered how her blue eyes had glowed when she looked at him, and I was sorry for her. There was a heavy silence. Then Derry said, We'd better get on to work, Pepsi-Cola. Derry rarely called Soda by Dad's pet nickname for him, but he did so then because he knew how miserable Soda Pop was about Sandy. I hate to leave you here by yourself, Ponyboy, Derry said slowly. Maybe I ought to take the day off. I've stayed by my lonesome before. You can't afford a day off. Yeah, but you just got back and I really ought to stay. I'll babysit him, Two-Bit said, ducking as I took a swing at him. Haven't got anything better to do. Why don't you get a job, Steve said. Ever consider working for a living? Work? Two-Bit was aghast. And ruin my rep? I wouldn't be babysitting the kid here if I knew of some good day nursery open on Saturdays. I pulled his chair over backward and jumped on him, but he had me down in a second. I was kind of short on the wind. I've got to cut out smoking or I won't make track next year. Holler, Uncle. Nope, I said, struggling, but I didn't have my usual strength. Derry was pulling on his jacket. You two do up the dishes. You can go to the movies if you want to before you go see Dally and Johnny. He paused for a second, watching Two-Bit squash the heck out of me. Two-Bit, lay off. He ain't looking so good. Ponyboy, you take a couple of aspirins and go easy. You smoke more than a pack today and I'll skin you, you understand? Yeah, I said, getting to my feet. You carry more than one bundle of riffing at a time today and me and Soda'll skin you, understood? He grinned one of his rare grins. Yeah, see you all this afternoon. Bye, I said. I heard our Ford's vroom and thought, Soda's driving. And they left. Anyway, I was walking around downtown and started to take this shortcut through an alley. Two-Bit was telling me about one of his many exploits while we did the dishes. While I did the dishes. He was sitting on the cabinet sharpening that black-handled switchblade he was so proud of. And I ran into 3 guys. I says, howdy, and they just look at each other. Then one says, we would jump you, but since you're as slick as us, we figure you don't have nothing worth taking. I says, "Buddy, that's the truth," and went right on. Moral: what's the safest thing to be when one is met by a gang of social outcasts in an alley? A judo expert? I suggested. No, another social outcast, Two-Bit yelped, and nearly fell off the cabinet from laughing so hard. I had to grin too. He saw things straight and made them into something funny. "We're gonna clean up the house," I said. "The reporters or police or somebody might come by, and anyway, it's time for those guys from the state to come by and check up on us. This house ain't messy. You ought to see my house." "I have, and if you had the sense of a billy goat, you'd try to help around your place instead of bumming around." "Shoot, kid, if I ever did that, my mom would die of shock." I liked Two-Bit's mother. She had the same good humor and easygoing ways that he did. She wasn't lazy like him, but she let him get away with murder. I don't know, though. It's just about impossible to get mad at him. When we had finished, I pulled on Dally's brown leather jacket. The back was burned black, and we started for 10th Street. "I would drive us," Two-Bit said as we walked up the street trying to thumb a ride, "but the brakes are out on my car. Almost killed me and Kathy the other night." He flipped the collar of his black leather jacket up to serve as a windbreak while he lit a cigarette. "You ought to see Kathy's brother. Now there's a hood. He's so greasy he glides when he walks. He goes to the barber for an oil change, not a haircut." I would have laughed, but I had a terrific headache. We stopped at the Tasty Freeze to buy Cokes and rest up, and the blue Mustang that had been trailing us for 8 blocks pulled in. I almost decided to run, and Two-Bit must have guessed this, for he shook his head ever so slightly and tossed me a cigarette. As I lit up, the Socs who had jumped Johnny and me at the park hopped out of the Mustang. I recognized Randy Adderson, Marcia's boyfriend, and the tall guy that had almost drowned me. I hated them. It was their fault Bob was dead, their fault Johnny was dying, their fault Soda and I might get put in a boys' home. I hated them as bitterly and as contemptuously as Dally Winston hated. Two-Bit put an elbow on my shoulder and leaned against me, dragging on his cigarette. "You know the rules. No jazz before the rumble," he said to the Socs.